this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, live this evening from KJZZ in Phoenix, Arizona. This is the last of our 4 live election specials, and we'll talk a bit later about what happens with The Middle going forward. But first, let me bring in our house DJ, Anthony Valadez. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Jeremy. How's it going?
It's going very well. How are you?
Feeling really good. Busy night last night, but it's so great to be back here today.
Yeah, didn't get a lot of sleep last night, but
not a lot of sleep.
It's good that we were in Arizona where, the election results come in a bit earlier than they do when you're further east in the country. You get to go to bed slightly earlier, but we still don't know in this state the winner of the Senate race that could determine the balance of power in Washington. That is the power of the middle, and I have to tell you there has been so much response in terms of the calls we've been getting all across the country at 844-4-MIDDLE. Last week, as you know, we were in Kansas City. We asked, what is an area where you disagree with the political party that you affiliate with? And listen to some of the calls we got that didn't make it on the air.
Hi, my name's David Broussard. I'm out of Kansas.
Hi, I'm Dan Brashears. I am in Hot Springs, Arkansas.
My name is Catherine Bowman, and I live in Columbia, Missouri. I am a Republican, and I have been all my life. But for me, I no longer trust most of the members of the Republican part of the government or voting for them. I have watched the Republican Party devolve.
So I am a Democrat, rare in Arkansas, and pretty much Democrat on almost all social issues, except I do have a hard time with, I can't not think about what I believe to be the life of an unborn child.
And my issue is with my party, Republicans, refusing to view things through a systemic lens. And it really leads to some detriments when it comes to just talking about policy in general. That's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Again, we are listening to all our voicemails, so if you can't get through at 844-4-MIDDLE because the lines are jammed, just leave a message for us. Okay, here's what we're asking this hour. What do the election results mean for you and your community, and what do you hope can be accomplished? Anthony, what is our number?
The number is 844-464-3353. That's 844-4-MIDDLE.
And remember, as we have this conversation, I want to hear from you, whatever your point of view. There's no condescension here. We're going to have respect for one another and have a civil conversation even when we disagree. Let's bring in our guests. Joining me in the studio is Mike Noble, Chief of Research at OH Predictive Insights, a nonpartisan polling firm here in Arizona. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Jeremy, thanks for having me.
Well, and is it fair to say, by the way, that the polls were wrong yet again as a pollster in attendance here?
No, absolutely not. Not only that, the polls are actually incredibly accurate. You look at the states of Georgia, which said it was going to be an incredibly tight race. Not only is it 49-49, it's going to a runoff. Fetterman, slight edge in Pennsylvania, which we saw there, tight in Nevada and Arizona. And as we're seeing right now, the polls are very much spot on. So it was a good year for pollsters.
All right. Well, we are also also joined from Atlanta, Georgia, by Emory University political scientist Andra Gillespie. Andra, welcome to you. And it's fair to say you're also in a state that could determine the balance of power when the Senate runoff happens next month. But were you surprised by the results overall across the country?
I think all of us are still waiting to see what the final House races look like, to see whether or not Republicans gain the predicted number of seats. We have seen some surprises in some of these Senate races. I don't think anybody could have predicted that Lauren Boebert would be behind 73 votes right now.
Congresswoman from Colorado, very far right congresswoman as well.
Very, very far right. And so, there certainly, have been some things that we have seen before, but the things that I am not surprised by are things that were perhaps discussed differently in the press. And so I think there was a lot of hype around the red wave. And, a lot of that was just hype, right? And it was a lot of people just trying to fill airspace to talk about the horse race. And we probably could have done a little bit better not talking about that as much as we did.
Well, let's see what our callers think about what happened and what it means for them. Once again, our number is 844-4-MIDDLE. Our first call is Mary in Lexington, Kentucky. Mary, welcome to the Middle.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. And tell us, what is the meaning of the election to you? How does it impact you and your community? And what do you hope now for the future?
Well, in August, our Supreme Court allowed an abortion ban to go into effect as long as once the fetal heartbeat is detected, then it's 6-nay on abortions unless to save the mother's life. We recently had a Kentucky Supreme Court ballot that, basically the government wanted to put into our Constitution for our state that it would not allow abortions, and overwhelmingly, luckily, the people of Kentucky denied that.
Yeah, this is one of a number of referendums that happened across the country yesterday, and all 5 of them, the people in different states from California to Kentucky to Michigan decided that they wanted abortion rights.
Exactly. And that's, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I also have a master's degree in assisted reproduction. I don't work in that field anymore, but still, I've been in that field where mothers are really struggling to have children and stuff. But then, sometimes even if they have a pregnancy, they may still end up having to lose that child or give up that child before it's born because of, health issues either to the mother or non-viability of the fetus.
Yeah, it's a great topic that you brought up there, Mary. Thank you so much for your call. I'm going to go to you first, Mike, on this because I imagine as you see state after state after state after state, including some red states like Kansas earlier this year, vote in favor of abortion rights, the people going and voting in favor of abortion rights. Does that surprise you?
Actually, it doesn't. I think what really the surprise was is that prior to the Roe v. Wade decision that came out, it was that Republicans had a double-digit lead in voter enthusiasm. Midterms are all about who comes out and shows up. And when Roe v. Wade happened, it basically jump-started the anemic support that Democrats had at the time and got them motivated. But also we see, like from the polling, it really impacted especially females because once they pulled back that federal law and it goes down to the states, like here in Arizona, went back to a law that was during the territorial days, so before we were even a state. And so you see that, and people really start to pay attention when things start to impact them. But when you look at the numbers among females, it was the number 2 issue overall that was going on outside of jobs and economy and inflation. But among women, it was just huge. Where females, 18 to 34-year-old females, or suburban women, or even independent women, all were very much leaning much more to the Democratic candidate than the Republican candidate.
Andra, do you think that abortion was a big factor in what happened yesterday and sort of tamping down what people expected to be more of a red wave?
I think it was a factor. I do question how we ask the question in surveys to try to figure this out. So, if we ask the question, what is the most important issue in the election? Abortion was certainly an issue for some people, but it didn't rank at the top of the list the way that inflation did. And so the question that we would ask using multivariate statistic models would be, what is the predictive value of saying that the inflation was first or abortion was first in predicting a person's vote choice? It may still play a role, but what it doesn't quite capture is people who may care most about abortion or immigration, but who are also using abortion attitudes as a litmus test. And so I think there's another version of the question that's not in all surveys. The Public Religion Research Institute does ask this question. Does a candidate's views on abortion affect your vote choice? So in other words, would you not vote for somebody who does not share your views on abortion? I think that's actually probably a much more accurate question that's not asked in a lot of surveys, so we won't know the answer to the question. But what we do know is that right after the Dobbs decision, PRRI asked this question, and they noticed that the number of Democrats who said that, yes, a person's views on abortion could be a deal breaker in terms of voting for them basically doubled after that. So we do know that there were some voters who were at least poised. We need to see whether or not they actually followed through and turned out to vote. But we're in the summer poised to make this the defining issue of their election.
Let's go to another call. This is Victoria in San Diego joins us now. Victoria, how does the election?
Hey there.
Hey, great to have you with us. What does the election result mean to you?
It means we're becoming more moderate again. I've been a lifetime Democratic voter. However, I was raised by moderate Republicans from Michigan, Ann Arbor. And so it was so relieved today to know that women's health care issues passed in Whitmer, was kept in office in Michigan. I'm crossing my fingers about Mark Kelly in Arizona because that's where my grandson lives. And so I'm just sitting here making a stew from Alice Waters because I know that it takes enough.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Hour, so we're good.
So, but you're happy
anyway,
that you're saying you're happy that the country, you see it as getting more moderate.
Yes, and I mean that even from my side. I'm kind of like almost what you'd call a blue dog Democrat, and I just, I was thinking that. Do I have to move back to the family home in Portugal or what? So I feel relieved, like maybe I could stay
All right.
in the States because I was really getting worried.
Victoria, thank you for that call. I'll say, by the way, as a person who's from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, where they have, bumper stickers on the cars that say, "I break for all animals except wolverines," referring to the mascot of the University of Michigan. Good. Hey, I love Ann Arbor. It's a great town. Mike, just real quick before we have to go to break here, your thoughts on that. It did show kind of the power of the middle.
Well, no, it absolutely did, is because you're seeing kind of this civil war break out in the GOP, this battle between the Republican Party of old, what's based on a platform or issue, compared to the MAGA crowd that's kind of more centered around a bit of Donald Trump. And you saw that, a lot of these candidates, like Arizona is a prime example. You look at our Republican primaries, is that everyone that Trump endorsed won their primaries. Like you could be this water bottle I got sitting here. If Trump endorsed it, it would probably win that Republican primary.
We're talking with political pollster Mike Noble and Andra Gillespie of Emory University, and taking calls from around the country. You're listening to The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy. With very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. have both been assassinated.
and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here and my wife.
Boom, boom. This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, we're live. We are a new national call-in show focused on bringing voices from the middle into the national conversation. By the way, if you miss any of the show or you want to hear more, you can check out our podcast, The Middle with Jeremy Hobson, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also go to listentothemiddle.com and we will link you to it there. My guests this hour are Arizona-based pollster Mike Noble of OH Predictive Insights and Emory University political science professor Andra Gillespie in Atlanta. Our question, what do last night's election results mean for your community, and what are your hopes about what can get done now? Our number, 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Let's go to Julie in Springville, Utah. Julie, welcome to The Middle.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Well, what do the election results mean for you?
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest, living in Utah, I'm not surprised by the results at all. I'm disappointed. There's no Democratic or even independent representation for the state of Utah now. And there won't be any for the foreseeable future, basically due to gerrymandering. And they redrew the district lines to completely dilute the Democratic areas. And I just think it really puts the people of Utah at a disadvantage without any kind of representation, and definitely not in Washington.
Well, given that you're disappointed by that, let me ask you part two of our question, which is, what are your hopes for the future? Do you have any hopes for the future? Is there anything you expect will be able to get done that you want, given the situation?
I mean, maybe not at the Washington level. To be honest, I kind of think that politics is best practice when you even do the small stuff, when you show up at community board meetings, city hall meetings. That's where the stuff that really affects you in your community and the people that you share your community with. And so I just hope that people who may feel there's no point, show up at the local level. That's really the place to direct your efforts and your passions.
Julie, thank you for calling in. Andra, let me ask you, as you look at the map across the country of the House seats, many analysts have said if it weren't for gerrymandering, Republicans probably wouldn't even be taking a majority if they do indeed do that, which they're now expected to do, that they wouldn't be doing that except for gerrymandering.
Well, The story is more nuanced than that. I do want to acknowledge that in most parts of the country, partisans are still allowed to draw maps. And this is a place where paying attention to local and state politics matters because it's your state legislators who redraw those maps every 10 years. There are some states like California that have moved to nonpartisan redistricting. And from a normative standpoint, that does make sense. I think we need to ask ourselves philosophically whether or not it makes sense to allow people who are holding office to draw their own districts and to draw the districts of their friends and people that they may aspire to be one day if they have federal aspirations. But then there's also this larger issue of a lot of the polarization that we see today is not only manifesting itself in terms of districts not being competitive by design and by the parties that control the most state legislatures kind of having the most sway and actually being able to determine how many congressional seats they can draw to their advantage. But we also have to acknowledge the ways that we have changed and how our behavior has actually contributed to polarization. And so one of the other things that we see is that the Democratic and the Republican parties used to be really big tents, and they were ideologically heterogeneous. And so you'd have liberals and conservatives in both parties, and the moderates could be bridges towards each other. The middle has shrunk. The liberals are by and large Democrats, with the exception of people of color, particularly African Americans, and the conservatives are Republicans. And never the twain shall meet, and there are fewer people who lose. So if we think about the places where we have seen seat flips, it's not the Lauren Boeberts of the world who are losing, even though she may lose in this case, right? If you look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, she won handily last night. It is not Paul Gosar or Andy Biggs. It is not the election deniers. It's not on the far left, your AOCs and your Ilhan Omars, right? It's the people in the middle who are the most vulnerable.
They're the most vulnerable.
And so we have to, on a personal level, think about ideological heterogeneity, own it, and then also stop using that as a means to other our opponents. So even when we disagree with members of the party, and I know that's hard to do in this particular moment, as much as is possible, I think you can call out people without sort of proclaiming them the other and the mortal enemy.
Right. Which I think actually, by the way, is one of the things that has attracted people to the idea of the middle as we have done this show. I will also say, Mike, I remember just to make the point that gerrymandering is not new. I remember a clip of the Texas governor, the late Texas governor Ann Richards, like on Larry King Live 20 years ago, saying, Larry, some of these districts are so gerrymandered you could drive down the street with both your car doors open and hit every house.
No, you're exactly right, and that's what's interesting is that depending on which state, some have independent redistricting commissions, but in the partisans, whether it's a blue or red team that is controlling it, they both do it. They basically, the party in power will typically take advantage of that. But it's interesting, even with the independent redistricting commissions, you have 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, but then you have that 5th independent. But is one truly independent? And so but what we're seeing right now, because this hyperpartisanship, like Pew Research asked the question in the 2020 election, if Biden would win or Trump would win, what would that mean? And basically both of them were like, this would be cataclysmic. And so both feel like they're battling for the soul of the country.
Let's go to Jonathan, who is joining us from Kentucky. Jonathan, welcome to The Middle.
Hi, love PBS. Thanks for taking my call. I'm in a state like your earlier caller from Kentucky where we're kind of starved for political choice. McConnell and Rand Paul, that's really about all you have.
Rand Paul just got reelected. Rand Paul just got reelected pretty handily.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so as a moderate, it's difficult to get your voice heard. But I guess my hope for the future is that with moderation, if you remember Bill Clinton's second term, when it was a heavy Republican House and Clinton was president, probably one of the best 4 years I remember for creative and positive legislation. And I'm hoping that the Democrats will propose a non-Biden solution for the presidency. And that we can have some moderation, because it looks like the Republicans are going to take the House and the Senate. Maybe not, but by the next 2 years, I think they will, for sure. So moderation, I guess, is what I'm hoping for, because there's a lot of hateful elements on either side. You know what I mean? On the Democratic side and on the Republican side, and we need to quell those voices and keep that hatred down and work towards positive solutions. I guess that's my hope for everything.
Great. Jonathan, thank you so much for that call. Again, our number, by the way, is 844-4MIDDLE. That is 844-464-3353. You can also reach out to us at listentothemiddle.com. Let me take a look at some of the notes that are coming in online. John writes from Wisconsin that he's frustrated by the impact of the Citizens United case equating political donations as speech and how the Supreme Court, he says, disabled the Voting Rights Act. Larry in Phoenix says his number one issue is political dysfunction. He says malfeasance, misfeasance, and nonfeasance. And a public school teacher writes from Oklahoma, concerned about two things: the safety of transgender students as a result of the election, and says criminalizing teaching history strangles the opportunity for our youth to learn from the past. Andra, let me ask you about that, because we have heard from a number of listeners over the last few weeks about trans rights. I've actually been surprised at how many people have called in on that issue. But clearly, many people see that as one of the things that's at stake right now with the results of this election, especially in places where more socially conservative Republicans have taken control.
This is an issue that's likely going to play out at the local level and at the state level. And so, where we have seen legislation regarding transgender youth issues, it's largely come up in state legislatures. And so what we don't have the bandwidth to do, but lots of people at the state and local level can do, is pay attention to what the balance of power looks like in state legislatures and whether or not the types of candidates are getting elected who are going to make that their issue. And so as your listeners are well aware, that's, it encompasses a wide range of issues. It started with bathroom bills. In some instances, it's talking about gender affirming care. Mm-hmm. And lots of places right now. We saw this happen in the last session, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of this in future legislative sessions around the country. The bills that come up about preventing transgender youth, particularly transgender girls, from participating in girl sports with cisgender girls. So, this is an issue that I suspect isn't going away, and in states that have Republican majorities and have the Republican trifecta, where both the state House, the state Senate, and the governor's office are Republican, we may see the passage of more of these types of bills.
Mike, do you see that show up in polling, trans rights issues?
Not so much, because basically when we have, at least from my experience of going through the polling, and I've done a lot, even studies specifically on this, is that when you get to the LGBT crowd, that's great. But then as they've kept expanding it, but once you get to the transgender stuff, what we found is a lot of folks don't, like the ones that say they understand it, they actually really don't at the end of the day when you run them through a battery of questions. In that it's just tough, because on that issue, especially with competing, et cetera, it's just, they're an incredibly small population. If I were to guess, probably 0.1%, if that, of the population. So they're a very, very small group. And so with that issue, but also I think that's one of the issues that, like, for example, folks on the left that pushing it, again, is kind of really pushed more moderate Democrats or more socially conservative Democrats out of that tent, as they've been kind of pushing some of these other issues that have been going on.
I will say, by the way, I think the number is higher than 0.1%. I think actually now they've done surveys about this. I'm looking at a Pew survey. About 5% of young adults in the U.S. consider themselves trans or non-binary. So it's certainly an issue that's coming up more and more people are identifying that way. Let's go to another call. Tim in Gilbert, Arizona is with us. Tim, welcome to The Middle. Hello. Tell us what is the meaning of the election to you? What do the results mean for you and your community?
So I'm a pretty young voter. This is the first ever election where I voted in person. My girlfriend and I just went down to the ballots together for the first time in person. And for me, it's been somewhat concerning because I've always leaned left my entire life. In this election, I'm not thrilled with the candidate selection on my side, but I also, I recognize that the opposing party in the Arizona election is a very clear platform of, kind of these theories of election fraud. And to me, that just to elect those officials would be so damaging to the integrity of our democracy. And, as a young person participating in this process, it's so concerning to me to see that, we're walking such a fine line between these two parties in Arizona when, to me, it seems that the Republican Party in Arizona is just, the consequences would just be damning to, our democratic process.
Do you feel like you said that you're a first-time voter?
Yes.
Do you feel like your vote will make a difference?
I think so. Given how tight of a race it is, we're still waiting for a good amount of the votes to come in. But just looking at some of these preliminary results that have come in from Arizona, it's margins of thousands of votes, which is, that's barely anything. I feel like, So
yeah,
to see that, and then just to think of how many young people I know who, probably weren't at the polls yesterday, just because I know. Voter engagement just isn't where it ought to be with people my age. It's really concerning to see those slim margins.
Well, Tim, thank you for voting and thank you for calling. And Mike, we did see in the last day or so that the numbers are showing that more young people turned out than in past elections.
Well, yeah, we see that obviously with the social media and ability to interconnect and actually pass information much quicker, that you can raise that awareness. So that has helped increase turnout. Also, the abortion issue and, of course, threats to democracy, which has been pushed along. And remember, Arizona was home to the nationally watched audit that was going on. So we spent, after last election, usually you're done, and spent 6 months talking about it, watching that very unprofessional audit happen. And it was interesting that they found that, there's no malfeasance going on. Plus, Arizona has actually a really good election system in place, and it's been good for some time. And it's really just been propagated due to really just, from the powers that be over on the Republican side, the MAGA side. But it is definitely concerning because if you don't have trust in the electoral system, how do you have a republic?
Let's go to line 3 here. Deb in Toledo, Ohio. Deb, welcome to the middle. And what do the election results mean for you?
Hi, thanks for having me on the program. Being in Ohio, I was really sad to see Tim Ryan's loss because I think that Tim Ryan sort of represents a way forward for the Democratic Party in terms of he has a real understanding, I think, of working class people that Democrats have sort of lost over the last several years. But I also just wanted to say that I think that his concession speech just showed what a class act he really is, because in his concession speech, he talked about the fact that it was his privilege to concede and to congratulate his opponent, because in this country, when the people have spoken, that's what we do, is we, get over the loss and we move on. I think that's a message that this whole country really needs to hear and pay attention to.
Deb, thank you for your call. Andra, she's talking about Tim Ryan, who's running for Senate as a Democrat in Ohio, lost that race to the venture capitalist J.D. Vance, who'd been endorsed by Trump. And Tim Ryan came out and gave this concession speech and said something to the effect of, it's an honor to give this speech because this is what you do when you lose an election in this country. What do you think of that?
I was in Georgia, so I watched Stacey Abrams' concession.
Right,
a lot has been made.
Enough going on in Georgia yourself. Exactly, right.
Yeah, but, the issue is that that's come up in the national press. It had become a talking point that, if Donald Trump didn't concede the 2020 election, well, Stacey Abrams didn't either. Having lived in Georgia in 2018, what Abrams did was acknowledge that she wasn't going to be the governor, even though she thought it was unfair. And at the time, she was convinced that enough voters had been suppressed or turned away from the polls or discouraged from voting by long lines, that if she was able to make a case for it, that she might be able to kind of get their votes counted in some way, shape, or form. And that proved to be a futile effort. But, ultimately at the end of the day, the way that I looked at it was she acknowledged she wasn't going to win. She wasn't plotting to, move into the governor's mansion while Brian Kemp was being inaugurated. She certainly didn't foment a riot in order to make that happen. But this time around, that strategy, which, may not have been the most gracious, but was handled very deftly and very professionally, because that's how Stacey Abrams carries herself. could still end up being weaponized a few years later when other people were doing things that were actually very, very different and very, very dangerous. So I think it was really incumbent upon Democratic candidates last night, and as we're seeing election results come in, model a different type of behavior to draw a sharp contrast.
That is Emory University political scientist Andra Gillespie, and you're listening to The Middle. We'll be right back.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world. The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan, tonight 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. We are live from KJZZ in Phoenix, Arizona. We're asking you what the election results mean for you and your community and what your hopes are about what can happen now. Our number is 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out to us at listentothemiddle.com. Our guests are Arizona-based pollster Mike Noble and Emory University political science professor Andra Gillespie. Let's get back to the phones. And we've got Alex here in Phoenix, Arizona. Alex, welcome to The Middle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
The election results so far, obviously in Arizona, there's a lot that's left undecided. So locally, I can't speak to that. But nationally, I do think it's really notable. What's heartening to me is the fact that a lot of what I would call election deniers have actually conceded their races. I had a lot of concern before this election that if that were to occur, we'd have a large swath of candidates basically calling into question our election system as a whole. And I am more positive about the robustness of our electoral system than I was beforehand.
Great. That's another call on that issue of people happy that we're seeing concession speeches. I'm just going to go straight into another call, if I can, here from Benjamin in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Benjamin, welcome to The Middle. What do the election results mean for you?
Thanks, Jeremy. It's actually Dr. Fosdick, and I am a practicing OBGYN with the Marshfield Clinic. I am incredibly relieved that we have a Democratic governor that will be staying on in Tony Evers, as well as likely Democratic Attorney General, because right now I am unable to practice medicine the way that I've always practiced and provide the standard of care to women that may happen to have a fetal cardiac myocyte rhythmic beating. If I were to do anything to that fetus, regardless of the woman's status, I could be, prosecuted criminally, lose my license, and potentially end my career. And it's a literal day-to-day practice for me and a life and death issue for my patients. So just a real sense of relief that the Democrats look to have held on to at least those positions. Hopefully the Republican Party won't get a supermajority in both of the Senate and the Assembly, and looking forward to the April election of a new Supreme Court justice that may be able to flip the composition of our state Supreme Court and look into overturning that 1849 law.
Let me just ask you one question. What would you have done if the Republican had won the governorship instead of Tony Evers?
Would have continued what we're doing now, which is unfortunately either denying care to some patients at our facilities or referring them over to the Twin Cities, which thankfully is close enough that most patients can get to fairly easily, but it is still a significant concern.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for your call. And let me go to you, Andra, because you're in a state that now does have much more restrictive abortion laws, correct? Following the Dobbs decision in Georgia.
Correct. In 2019, the Georgia legislature and Governor Brian Kemp passed a law that restricted abortion after the detection of a fetal heartbeat. So at the 6-week mark, it was enjoined until the Dobbs decision. And then after the Dobbs decision, the current interpretation, which I believe, don't quote me on this, is still actually up for litigation, might open that up to actually allow for the abortion ban to go into effect.
Do you think that do you think that voters made different decisions about who they were voting for, let's say for the Senate or for governor, if they lived in a state like Georgia, where there were more restrictive laws after Dobbs, versus if they lived in a state like Illinois, where abortion was not an issue in the same way because the laws didn't change post-Dobbs?
I can't answer that question right now. Political scientists do run a big national survey that has sufficient sample sizes in each congressional district. I have no doubt that abortion questions were answered or, were asked on that survey. Mm-hmm. So, within the next year or so, I expect that somebody is going to be writing that paper that's actually going to look at that data per each congressional district and actually be able to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Mike, you haven't done any polling on that?
Oh, we've asked a lot of questions, basically, as we've tested in the states, is that, really, and it's funny, a lot of the answers, frankly, in politics are usually common sense ones of that. When you talk about how this impacts, like once things impact you, you start paying attention. So when the law gets passed, and again, Roe v. Wade was talked about for 4 decades, and then all of a sudden it dropped in the middle. But when it did, it was kind of too late for folks to kind of get ballot initiatives on there, and that's why it'll be a big 2024 point. But when you have that, and once you have certain things impacting you, they really start thinking, they start getting involved. And actually, I would not be surprised whatsoever when the results come out of some of these more larger studies that it did, in fact, play an impact, especially, again, those most impacted, females, especially younger females and Republican females.
Well, and we haven't talked that much about inflation this hour, but that is obviously something that impacts just about everybody in this country in some way, especially people who are lower on the economic ladder, where, the cost of gas, the cost of milk, the cost of housing, the cost of transportation really does affect what they are able to do on a day-to-day basis. Let's go to a call in Texas. Quinn is joining us. Quinn, welcome to The Middle. What do the election results mean for you?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Probably appropriate for the title of your show. I found myself kind of lamenting the loss of the middle. Generally, I tend to be, I want my government small, and I don't want laws that that legislate my personal liberty. So let family planning decisions be left to the family, and if somebody wants to hunt, let them make the decision to go hunt. And I started looking through voting records and issues, and it just seemed that generally my choices were all it was a very divisive lot. Like the rhetoric and the narrative is all or nothing, far left or far right. And I got to thinking about other geographies where they have multi-party systems where there may be 6 parties and they have to share power and come to compromise. And I think maybe that's kind of the recipe for finding the middle. And I just didn't seem that I felt like I had candidates that represented a common sense middle ground approach to our problem solving.
Can I ask who you voted for in the Texas governor's race that a lot of people were watching between Governor Greg Abbott, who won, and Beto O'Rourke, who lost?
And there you go. I voted Libertarian, almost straight ticket, largely because some of the rhetoric around gun policies from Beto were a little bit leftist for me. But on the family planning issue, I couldn't in good conscience vote for the incumbent. And I would have basically written in anybody except Dan Patrick.
Well, that's very interesting, Quinn. Thank you so much for calling. Andra, I knew we'd get to this issue, which is, people not happy with the two parties and they don't know what to do.
Well, I don't have a good answer for you. I'll probably have an answer that your listener will not like. The reason why we have a two-party system is because we have single-member districts and first past the post elections. And that tends to lend itself to two dominant parties emerging from that. And the proportional representation system that the listener speaks about works very well in a parliamentary democracy where the executive and the legislative branch are one and the same, but our separation of powers would actually probably make that a little bit more unwieldy here in the United States. So moving to a multi-party system, I don't know is going to have the exact same type of impact that the listener envisions. What I would say, though, is that there may be other opportunities for people to be able to exert influence on elections in other ways. And so, one of the ways that people talk about this, and I will defer to my colleagues who specialize in social choice to answer this question, but, one way we could sort of alter our election system to think about this a little bit differently is to think about moving towards ranked choice voting, where people, where you have to get a clear majority of support, but where people actually get to rank their choices, in a multiple field of candidates. It's likely going to be Democrats and Republicans, and we'll just have many of them running, as we have seen happen in the places where this is being used, like New York City and San Francisco and
Alaska,
and now Alaska. So, this is an opportunity for people to say, this person is my first choice, this person is my second choice, this person is my third choice. And the hope of lots of proponents of ranked choice voting is that it actually allows for the moderate candidate, the compromise candidate, to, if not outright win on the first ballot, to perhaps end up being the second or third choice and actually being able to cobble together a victory there.
Mike Noble, what about the issue of people not being able to find what they want in the choices that are available to them? And do you think ranked choice voting is the way forward?
I think ranked choice voting definitely will help with the current system, but it's actually one of the most common questions I get asked in the last few years, and I've noticed it's bubbled up more and more, but you see it in the current numbers. For example, like Arizona, Nevada, you look at party registration levels. Actually, both Democrats and Republicans are both dropping. Independents are actually the fastest growing party, but the problem is currently is that third-party vote share is at its all-time low. I mean, the heydays of Ross Perot, those are long gone. And so right now that what we're seeing is that there is a clamoring for that. And you look at, in England or Israel, they have multiple parties. Heck, in India, they got like 30 over there. But it's interesting, when you have a lot more parties, it makes you have to make deals and cobble together coalitions. And right now, you got red team and blue team, as I like to refer to them as, and as they're getting pulled to their respective fringes, the people are finding there's really not a home for them and not much of a viable choice in the middle.
We've got some comments coming in online to this issue. Maggie in Wisconsin calls herself a split ballot voter, and she wishes there was a candidate who would protect my uterus, the environment, and my right to firearms. Let's go to Noah in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Noah, welcome to the middle. And what do the election results mean for you?
I was happy to see Fetterman win. I know that was really close, and a lot of people were concerned after only the one debate that they had. So I was really hoping for him to win. Especially now that I know you guys, a lot of people are talking about split ticket voting. You see that a big difference between Shapiro and Fetterman.
Shapiro, the governor, who got
that,
more votes from Democrats than Fetterman did. It wasn't even close with Shapiro, but with Fetterman, as you say, it was pretty close.
Right. And I just think the previous caller you were just talking about protecting her uterus and also her gun rights. I think I called previously and talked about gun rights briefly. I left a message, but I think that there's room there. With ranked choice voting and with the Georgia race, going into a runoff, and they have 2% libertarian vote that they're going to have to basically go for. I think that that could be should be a bigger thing and a bigger growth and maybe a third party or fourth party or more parties.
Well, is there one issue with Fetterman that you're excited about now that he'll be in the Senate?
Yeah, I think that his stance on he has a libertarian stance on cannabis. And I think that I used to be a canvasser recently. I switched jobs, but a lot of people were talking about that. That was a top issue for them, just as and they use it medically or that nature, and just taking away the stigma or allowing more people to have jobs from that. So I think that he represents a good direction for the party, picking up more rural voters in that aspect, like a libertarian way.
Noah, thank you so much for that call. I guess, that's a topic we should talk about because, honestly, a couple of states at least yesterday voted to legalize marijuana, including Missouri, just more and more and more. Is this an issue that you think, Mike Noble, that we are going to see federal action on? Are the polls catching up to the point? Are the people's attitudes changing to the point where it's going to be a popular position to say, we're going to legalize it nationwide?
That's a great question, Jeremy. I think it is actually an inevitability. So for Arizona, for example, back in 2016, it was on the ballot. It was close. It only lost by half a percentage point, came back again and 4 years later, and it passed with 60% of the vote. And, what is kind of considered more conservative red Arizona. And so I think you're going to – because the way that folks view it, it's kind of very normalized. People kind of treat it like alcohol. It's very similar in that respect, but actually significantly safer. But I think it's an inevitability, and I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. But I think more and more states are going to be piling on as their years go.
If I could just add one thing
quickly,
here.
Andra. Yeah.
So even though it passes in 3 states, I believe, it also failed in the Dakotas, both North and South, I believe. So, this still doesn't quite stem the tide of it having been legalized in so many parts of the country. But there is the potential for backlash, and not everybody seems to be completely on board with this.
And by the way, the middle is on all the way across the Dakotas. So if you're in the Dakotas, please write to us from either North Dakota or South Dakota to listentothemiddle.com and let us know what you think about those measures on cannabis failing there. We have run out of time, which means, we run out of time for the serious part, which is the calls, which means we now have time for the fun part, which is the Anthony. Anthony Valadez is back with us with the most fun part of the show, the notorious needle drop.
The infamous. It is the infamous and notorious needle drop. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to drop the needle in the middle of the record, and I'm going to play a 5-second snippet, and you need to tell me who this British band is, which features an iconic Phoenix-born vocalist. Bonus points if you can name her. Now, a little hint. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, and for a little fun, because you political folks are really good at this game, I'm going to play a remix version. All right, Jeremy, Andra, Mike, are you all ready to play the needle drop?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Okay, needle drop time. Who's the band? Who's the artist? Go.
I'm going to have to take a pass. I was born in 1984.
Oh, my gosh. Andra.
I have no idea.
I don't know this on my own, but the producer here is telling me it's Fleetwood Mac.
Oh,
Bingo.
That's not fair. That is not fair. You didn't get to phone a friend. This isn't Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. All right. Andra Gillespie at Emory University and Mike Noble with OH Predictive Insights. Thank you both so much for your the context you brought and your expertise tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Anthony, let's talk for a minute because we just did 4 live shows on over 500 public radio stations with no distributor. There's no NPR, no APM, no PRX. We did this all by ourselves. It has never been done before. We did it thanks to 4 wonderful public radio stations that lent us their resources to make this happen. KJZZ in Phoenix, KCUR in Kansas City, WGCU in Fort Myers, and of course WILL in my hometown of Urbana, Illinois, which helped us get all the shows up to the satellite so that public radio stations could carry them live. We did that all with this wonderful team: Alex Ashlock, John Barth, Sam Burmistaz, Cece Fadape, Lisa Napoli, and Harrison Patino. So what happens now, Anthony? What happens now? Well, we would like to make needle drop. I don't know. We would like to make this into a regular program in 2023 to keep giving voice to so many Americans in the middle, whether the geographical middle, the political middle, the middle class, or just the middle as a state of mind. We would like to keep a live national call-in show on public radio. It has not existed with this kind of reach since the end of Talk of the Nation back in 2013. We are going to need support to keep this going, so we're going to be on the hunt for funding. This isn't a pledge drive, don't worry, unless you are a big foundation and have a lot of money, in which case, please call us. In the meantime, subscribe to our podcast, The Middle with Jeremy Hobson. Reach out to us at listentothemiddle.com. Tell us what you think. Anthony, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this. Your energy is so infectious, and the music you brought was really wonderful.
Thank you, Jeremy. Such an honor, and such an honor to hear from the voices from everybody listening.
Our theme music was composed by Andrew Haig, our technical director here in Phoenix. Tiara Vian here at KJZZ, also help from Ben Overbot. John Hoban, one of the first station leaders to say yes to the middle. Thanks also to WABE, KCRW, Jason Croft, and Lily Duncanson, and the more than 500 public radio stations that made it possible for the whole country to listen to the middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Hope to talk to you again very soon.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
When segregation was a law, one mysterious Black club owner, Charlie Fitzgerald, had his own rules.
Segregation in the day, integration at night.
It was like stepping on another world.
Was he a businessman, a criminal, a hero?
Charlie was an example of power. They had to crush him.
Charlie's Place, from Atlas Obscura and Visit Myrtle Beach. Listen to Charlie's Place on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.